This one here I call The Naturalist Returns to India 12 years ago. And it's somewhat autobiographical, which is part of the reason I enjoy doing it, because I like to look at my own pictures. And so this is the natural history of the Himalayan foothills. This is a picture of the globe taken from high up from the satellite. And this is India, Arabia over here, Southeast Asia over here, and up at the top. So the Himalayas run from up here from Pakistan all the way over to where it runs into Burma. And there are little offshoots of it down in Thailand. And the two places that I'm going to talk about are where I went to school and the region around it, which is here. The school was called Woodstock School, established in 1856 by the Society for Female Education in the East, purchased by a consortium of Protestant denominations in the early 1900s. And it was a great school to go to because it was where it is. And so part of this will be there. And then the other part will be over here in northeastern India, in the Darjeeling area. And I want to just say that these are the foothills. And you can see they're pretty extensive mountains. Now the foothills go up to 17,000 feet. And then there are the snowy ranges above there. Okay. Okay, so I'll use the up and down. So this is that pic. So I need to remember. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time describing the territory, which I got to know, but which you can then use to project onto the kind of diversity that's in this range of mountains. And I'm giving it from one end to another. Very temperate in this area, highest rainfall in the world in this area. And the first picture is looking from south to north, and then I'll have another picture looking from Woodstock down to the plains. So that's what it looks like if you were just at the edge of the foothills and look back, and my school was located right around in here, and you can see that there's wild country back there. When you wanted to go hiking, all you had to do was step out the back door. Told my father he could have been a millionaire, not send me to a more encouraging boarding school. You see, there's a lot of mountain ranges, and in the background, those are the the high Himalayas, which in that part of India don't get up much above 22,000 feet. But that's still significant. As I said, the tree line is somewhere around 17,000 feet. Now you turn around and look back down towards South India. So that first one there was just looking as if it were towards you. Now we're looking away. And this, which looks like the plains, is a big plain. It's actually a big flat valley called the Dune. That's where Dehradun basmati rice is grown. As far as Indians are concerned, the best rice in the world. And then there is another range of mountains called the Siwaliks, which is very old, and paleontologists love it. But I want that this shows very nicely how, when you look at the north side of the ridge, in other words, this is northern hemisphere, the north side of the ridges are shaded and filled with forests. And so, my home was where I lived, where I went to school, was right in here. And we went hiking, we'd go out this way, Tirri Road, out to the town of Tirri, which was 40 miles away. And this is then turning around and looking back again the other way. Now, let's see, I'm not sure, I don't think I can do, just a little bit. So here's where Woodstock is. There's that Jubber Gate. So you were just looking right in here. And we would hike, and pretty much this is our territory. And again, you see the north sides are forested. Down the valley, it's down here about 3,500 feet. And so it's very dry in the valleys. And these are the south-facing slopes. not forested, but as soon as you get up high and there are these beautiful middle elevation forests. And of course, there are rocks and cliffs and caves, limestone, quartzite. The geology is wonderful. And so this is one more view of this general area, because I love the geography of the area. And this then is our immediate area. This was my stomping grounds. There's a school. Pepper Pot was about 3.5 miles, and we'd go out there at night in a full moon, so we could sit on the top of the ridge and look at the snows by moonlight. That's a part of natural history. Is just appreciating your sky and the whole environment. Our common daily hike was to go out here, down here to Siakoli, which was 5 miles out. We'd run out to Siakoli and back after school to get a cup of tea, go down to Tatura, another 7 miles, 12 miles, swim, fish all day long, chase butterflies, and then hike back. That was a nice 24-mile day trip for Saturdays. And then Nag Tiba was the high point. That was, as the crow flies, about 9 miles away. And my older brother in the 1950s had a classmate who, because of polio, they were told not to hike any further than 10 miles in one day. And so he went to Nag Tiba and back in one day, supposedly in 14 hours. But it's just under 10,000 feet. So there's a good range in topography that I have been up and down almost every one of those valleys. I only once dated a girl on a Saturday, and I said, there's a stream I didn't get to visit because I took her downtown to see a movie. And eventually had a girlfriend that understood that we weren't going to go down and see movies on Saturdays. So this is from this point here, Top Tiba, 8 miles, looking back towards Woodstock. And so this is Top Tiba. Here's Siakoli down to Tatura. And this, again, is a nice visualization of the kind of topography, dry south slopes, moist valleys, lots of water, and lots of places to explore. By the time I was this is my high school days. That was in 1960. I was 15 years old. And this was after a 4-day hike up to the summit of Nag Tiba. And I have on my backpack a fern press, which weighed about 12 pounds because I used asbestos sheeting that was going to be sturdy enough. Marine plywood packboard. That was our standard equipment so that we would hike with packs, 20, 30 miles a day. I wish I was 17 and innocent again. Loved climbing. This is taken over here on this one is 63 on Top Tiba. And so one more just to love that area. Now, there are roads in there now that were not there then. We were essentially at the end of the regularly motorable road. The road to Tiri, sometimes you could get a Jeep through and sometimes not. But almost every year in the monsoons, and this is true up and down the Himalayas, there'll be landslides that take out a road in the valley, and it takes a while to fix them. But these are the kinds of roads that when I visited with Connie last time, that was 2010, you can see the roads are narrow and they can be scary. This was headed down towards the Tura. This is where there used to be a path and now there's a road. And I just wanted to point out that's part of the road that goes down the valley. But again, the diversity of the landscape is terrific. Where it's not too steep, it's farm. You have to remember that there's really not much real wilderness here. People have been living there for thousands of years. And so the countryside is pretty stabilized. Since we were there, it's wonderful that the amount of trees that were cut for charcoal has almost completely disappeared. And so there are actually more forests now than there were 50 years ago in this area. And that's an improvement. The last time I was there, we take a hike. I like hiking and I like teaching. And here's a group of kids. for Woodstock School, and we went out on a fern hike. And you can see the hillside there. This is the kind of places where we hiked, all ages. And so I'm going to start with ferns, because this is what the oak trees look like in the monsoons. The trunks are essentially bare during the dry season, which is the winter and spring, and up until the 26th of June, plus or minus a week when the monsoons start. And then the monsoons come out, and out come the ferns. And so here are some of the ferns. And I love them. I'm just putting in English names. Plisticum nigropaliseum was the Latin name, which I started early on. I give credit to a man named Dr. Robert L. Fleming, and his son, Robert L. Fleming Jr. now lives up the river, who both of us trained by his father. And he taught me how to press ferns and inspired me, since I had a little Latin with Miss Marley, to learn to interpret technical language. Little alternate spleenwort, splenium. These are beautiful little ferns that grow in the rocks, and they're found throughout Eurasia. You'll see them in England, you'll see them in eastern Russia. This is one of the little lip ferns. They're called lip ferns because the spores are produced on the lips of the frond. And this one was called white margin lip. Sometimes they're called silverbacks. There's actually a couple hundred species of this, and some of them including in our area, the same genus. So that's one of the neat things about working with ferns that are old plants, is that you can learn them in the Himalayas and recognize where they where to look for them in the books here. This is a beautiful little fern called Bible fern. You notice compared to the others, it's starting to get old. It has very, very thin fronds. And the reason it was called Bible fern is because it was so thin at this time of year, you could press it in your Bible and it made a beautiful little fern, and it didn't ruin the pages of your Bible, or not too much anyway. And a nice example of the quartzite in our area. This is called naked line fern. Not sure exactly why. Well, Leptophila, I guess is. But what's curious about this fern, my fingers give you a scale. These are mature ferns. This is the only really regularly annual fern. This is mature. When the monsoons start, there'll be spores on the ground. They germinate. This is a typical juvenile frond of a fern. Many ferns start out with one little sort of half moon shaped frond, and then the kind of divisions they'll have develop with later fronds. So this one has only two kinds. It's got a juvenile frond and a 3-leafleted frond. And you can see the sporangia are just about mature in October. And by the time November rolls around, they'll have died back. It's been used in some interesting genetic experiments because there are not many ferns that are annual. This one called four-eared fern, a beautiful fern. It's another one that has the spore cases on under a little fold on the edge of the leaves. And the way these little extra leaflets stick out at the bottom is why they're called four-eared fern. And this is very widespread. It's a very nice fern for cultivating in the right climates. Polypods, big genus, worldwide polypodium, North and South Hemisphere. Took a while to learn them, thanks to the Flemings. And this one, Polypodium mycorrhiza, small-rooted polypod. Almost all of the polypods in this area grow on trees or on wet, seepy cliffs. They're not terrestrial ferns. We have the licorice fern here, and it looks an awful lot like that. Our licorice fern here is really interesting because unlike all the rest of our ferns, it has a winter cycle. In other words, the ferns are just coming up now. The rains have come and they'll start maturing their spores sometime around April or May. And the spores will be shed and then the leaves fall off. They're deciduous. It's our only epiphyte like this. Yes.
Are any of these edible when they're quite young?
There were some edible ferns there. I am not a forager. And so when somebody asks me if something is edible, I just say I probably can't say. There were some, and they were popular. I should mention that bracken fern, which we have here, it's worldwide. Now, there are a lot of varieties of bracken. It grows on our roadsides. A lot of people consider it a pasture weed because it is livestock don't like it at all. And but in Japan and Korea, the young fiddlenecks of bracken were picked and pickled, and so they would eat them throughout the year. Now, there's very little stomach cancer in Asia, but wherever they ate these pickled kosari, it was called, there was a higher incidence of stomach cancer. And so now when people say are bracken edible, well, you might taste one, but it's not recommended. So and generally our ferns are not really palatable. Sword ferns are really, really tough. But I like to say that in the spring out at the coast, when the sword ferns are starting to uncurl, the elk eat them with relish. And somebody said pickle relish. Because when they're just unrolling, they haven't developed all the tannins. And it's tannins. I mean, there's hardly a bug or caterpillar or animal that eats a sword fern, which is why they're so durable. And in the same family is the sickle fern. And we have varieties of this sickle fern. I have some in fact, I have two different species of Sertomium. Very beautiful, big, broad leaves. And then the membrane polypod, you can't tell in this picture, but these things get to be this long. One big leaf. So you only get these in places where there's high rainfall and high humidity. And this is Crete fern, and this again widespread, especially in drier parts of the temperate zone. This is not a rainforest fern. And then I have two here I'm going to show you that are from herbarium specimens, because these are ones. This is oleander, and I'll show the other one, mouse ear fern. For those of us in high school, and there were at least 3 or 4 of us who hunted ferns. The rare ones were prizes, and oleander was one. I found it only on one tree in our area, and then later I found a cliff with it, and it was the best thing. And the same thing happened with the mouse ear fern. There was little tiny things. Now, you don't see in a dried plant, but it's covered with little silvery hairs, and when they're young, they really look like little mouse ears. And so when you'd find them, it was a prize. And of course, amongst those of us who were ferners, there were lots of mosses and liverworts. This has become my specialty, and I'm not going to do a lot, but just to show that this is on a retaining wall called a pushta in Hindi, and all the roads in rainy, hilly areas have got to have retaining walls. And there's a nice collection of both mosses and liverworts. This little thing here is where the spores are produced. That's a flat liverwort, which is a thalloid, and in there are mosses. And I have spent much of my career since coming to the States working on those two groups of plants, mainly because there was lots to learn. When I came to the States, there just weren't that many ferns. I've described one new species of fern, but there's only about 70 ferns in the Pacific Northwest. And I collected almost 100 different kinds of ferns within a 10-mile radius of Missouri. So it was a fern lover's paradise. Others, people who've gone to Borneo, Mount Kinabalu, there's 6,000 ferns on Mount Kinabalu. Ferns, I love them. And some of the flowering plants are familiar. You'd know this is a geranium the moment you saw it. Geranium wallachianum. Really beautiful one. This one here was called a purple popper. I'm not sure what family it's in. It's close to what we'd call the scrop family. But that was because you could pick a flower like this, you know how kids play, and then put it against your hands like that, and it would pop. And so I only knew it as a purple popper. Impatiens, we have impatiens native to Oregon, and also invasive species of impatiens here. Beautiful ornamental plants, begonias, Here's a native begonia from the Himalayan foothills. Begonia picta. And this is a king stinging nettle. Had 3 different kinds of stinging nettle in the Landauer Hills. The biggest one, as you might imagine, was called the big king stinging nettle, and its leaves are like this. And you look at those spines, it was the most vicious looking one. Then there was one called the jack or the knave stinging nettle, which had regular ovate leaves, and its sting was much worse. But the worst was the one known as the queen stinging nettle. It had sort of skinny leaves, but if you got stung by it, it hurt for days. One of my boyhood stories was there was a small fire that started close to where our dorms were, and all the high school kids were sent out to try to put it out. And it was on a steep slope, talus scrabble. And so we got above it, and so we were sliding down the hill and just knocking rocks down to put the fire out. It was working, except that I went over a queen stinging nettle with 1 foot on one side and 1 on the other. Rubus raspberries. You're beginning to see that the vegetation and so on, although this is exactly on the other side of the world, there is a temperate flora, and you can learn there and do botany here, and vice versa. It's and of course I like to take pictures. This is an interesting member of the nightshade family with potatoes and things like that, that has spines on its leaves. Down in the valley, there are these things that look like a cactus, and these are euphorbs, same family as poinsettia. And throughout Africa and many parts of the world, where there are desert dryland plants that look like cactus, but cacti are found only in the New World, except for 1 species that managed to get across the Atlantic the other way. So this takes the ecological role of a cactus and is a beautiful example of convergent evolution by the habitat, because set them side by side, Berkeley Botanical Garden, I think still has 2 gardens, one with a cactus garden and one with a euphorb garden side by side. It's a wonderful one to visit if you get down to Berkeley. And then this is just a taste of the trees. Cassia is one that's well known. There are plants that are considered to be medicinal in this group. I did love butterflies. I collected butterflies first. I was probably about 8 years old when my father taught me how to collect butterflies. Unlike many missionaries, took up hunting. In fact, I knew one who did more hunting than he did managing the hospital. But my father, for some reason, was interested in butterflies. The American Museum of Natural History zoologist taught him how to make field mounts, put them in glassine envelopes. First thing you do is check them out while they're fresh to make sure they're male and female. And then my father has hundreds of butterflies in the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And I took it up. It was my older brother who came in and learned the same thing, told my father, I don't know, there are only 2 kinds. They're either males or females. But many of the ones that you see here, like the copper, these are the little blues. We've got little coppers and hair streaks, these browns, a satyr. Now this is a Western courtier, feeding on a little bit of dung, which how the butterflies get their ammonia. And oak leaf butterfly, which is a fantastic butterfly. There are a couple of species of kalima, and they mimic I think I can do this. I'm gonna let go of it. I have about a 20-minute clip. Well, I don't know if I can move these things around. Wait a minute. It should be. Here it is. Oops. Yeah. Oh, come on. Okay, let's see here. I should try that again. See if I can get these. It's interesting because when you see these flying, they flash that blue and gold. It flashes and flashes and flashes, and then they duck into a tree and they disappear. Uh, and they were real prizes. Uh, I just love that. I have T-shirt I made for my school class reunion that has a butterfly on it. And then there is the yak killer. This is the Asian giant hornet. I have a little bit of moving film of them, but this is this big. This is the biggest wasp in the world. And there are more deaths from this wasp, for instance, in Japan than any other poisonous animal. Beautiful animals. And they've just been, I don't know if you remember, you've seen that there were a couple that were found and they've gone after them. I don't think they've gotten established. And then, as I said, I wasn't a hunter, didn't do a lot of game, but we did see a lot of monkeys. And here's the rhesus monkeys. In the days that I was there, people would chase them down, catch them in nets, and send them to the States for research. That is now forbidden because they're considered sacred. And one of the things that it's done is that they've made them much less afraid of humans. And they can be real pests. Now, this is a male that just saw me. And now what he's doing is saying, I'm not going to attack you. You learn when you get these things that what eye contact does makes a big difference. So this isn't just being shy, just letting me know he's in charge and he doesn't have to do anything else. On the other hand, when mommy's got a baby on the back, she doesn't want you coming close. And then there were the langurs. These are, can I try that again? This is just getting me. Oh, thank you. I think the problem, okay. Sort of like the langurs, they have become very bold because nobody shoots them. And they're big, they're strong, and they can be mean. Many of the houses that I knew when I was growing up now have wire on all of their porches and verandas, because otherwise the monkeys just come right in and steal your food off your table. Okay, there. It's funny, I don't understand how that changes. I was from an early age really interested in snakes. As a schoolmate, I was known as the kid who'd have a snake in his pocket. I was not a popular little boy. And by the time I got to high school, I learned that it isn't funny to tease people with snakes. I actually had a sort of a crusade to get people over being afraid of snakes. And I got a hold of a member of the python family called a graceful daman. It's a small snake like this. And graceful daman was a good name. It did not move fast. It always moved slowly. It was a very friendly snake. You could hold it. I kept it as a pet for a long time before releasing. And I'd bring it up to school and I'd talk, and I got most of the girls in the class to be willing to at least touch it. But once I brought it into the classroom where Mary Pollock, she's not here, and she just started screaming, and that's what it taught me. Not everybody is going to like snakes, but by that time I knew back off. And then there's this little skink. And just like our skinks, we have blue-tailed skinks. They drop their tails at the touch of something that might be after them. So I'm going to make the switch now and sort of rush through a little different territory. Going over here, from where we were, took the train to Delhi, flew over to Siliguri, and went into this area here. You notice that Nepal is in between Sikkim and where we were up here. Sikkim has been an independent country, and it traded governance or made an arrangement with India to become a state of India, but they're very well protected, and they sell their electricity to India, and they don't allow people to come into their valleys in exchange for the Indians taking over the military control. Because right here, so here's Darjeeling, and this is Nepal. This is the road into Tibet. And this shows, so there's Bhutan, Sikkim, and I'll point up here, this is Kinchenjunga, which is the third highest mountain in the world. And so what we did, we started in Darjeeling, and we had a driver. This was a Jeep adventure. Drove to Kalimpong, and then here's where you enter Sikkim, went up to Gangtok, and then this way, and then this sort of fork. I did this afterwards, and I still have not been able to figure out, did we go this way or this way? But one of those routes was the route, and visited temples and things along the way up to Pelling, which is sort of at the end of the road, and there's an old Raja's mansion that's been turned into a resort. And it is absolutely fantastic. It's an area of temples and beauty, and we spent a couple of days there. And I'm gonna show just some pictures about this area. So this is starting from Darjeeling, tea plantations. Spent a lot of time learning about tea. There in the distance, that's Kinchenjunga, and these are, the Himalayan foothills. So in that part of the world, tea. This was Wangchuk. We had a Sherpa as a guide. We hit it off really well, because when he took us into a temple, and I knew that first thing you do is you do 3 deep bows, and he said he respects us, and we got a good connection. And he just took us all over the place and drove up. As I said, these are terrific temperate forest zones, but where it's flat, it's been cultivated for generations and generations. Beautiful stream valleys. I mean, these are places I could spend a week just exploring a valley like that. Little bridges. This is the Rangit River, just heading deeper and deeper into the mountains up towards Pelling. I just put the butterflies in here because they were sitting on flowers that are growing on the edge of the bridge. There's the peacock butterfly, aptly named. Beautiful butterfly. It was not rare. This is a red Helen. On zinnias, you notice, zinnias around the world. This is called a jester, and this is called a commodore. And I will point out that it's, because we'll come back to this, that it's sitting on a prayer wheel. And the reason it's on the prayer wheel is that people turn the wheels with their hands. And so there's salt and minerals left on the prayer wheel. And that's what the commodore is doing there. And this is called a sailor, which I learned by the way it flies. It goes flap, 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 and then sails. Flap, 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 sail. Flap, 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 sail. Bunch of those. Tortoiseshell. We've got tortoiseshells in our, doesn't this look familiar? What's on the grills when you come out of the mountain sometimes up at the high country? Bamboos of all kinds. Little ones, bamboos. These, these big bamboos, they don't grow like that overnight. That has to be grown in a clone because these are not trees. These come out of the ground from a whole turf of bamboos. And the older the colony, the bigger the stems can get to be. They start. So these things here, this is the whole colony is probably on the order of 50 to 60 years old. Some of them are only flower once, and then the whole colony dies. Interesting plants. ferns. Now, the ferns that are down here are not much like, are often different from the ones that were up in our more temperate area. These are things that I've seen, for instance, in the Cook Islands and in more tropical zones. The giant tangle fern covers big hillsides in Maria. That's what its sword ferns look like. Venus maidenhair fern. I've got one next to my door, just here in Eugene. Very hardy. They like to spread. Don't know what that is, just a beautiful fern. This is another polypod, a linear. This has got a skinny one instead of a big fat one, like the membrane polyfern. Lindsaya, here its spore cases. And then look at this. This is oleander. A whole colony of oleander growing up a tree. I mean, they're not maybe very pretty in here, but that sure made my heart go pumpity pump. Oops. And then this is a selaginella. Now it's interesting, most of our selaginellas, despite club mosses here, look like little mosses. We have only one that's flat, really flat like this, and it grows up in the Columbia River Gorge. And our book says, and disjunct in Idaho. Well, if you go to Idaho and up the Selway River, you find that it's not disjunct, that's its home territory for Selaginella douglasii, named after David Douglas. Not quite as tough as these, but the same kind of flat one. Now, this is along the road, and what's this a picture of? Well, what I want you to notice is that these are not these, there's an electric wire down there, but these are, it's a big colony of colonial spiders. And these things are like this. Supposedly some of these could capture birds. Isn't that something? And that was on the way up towards Pelling. I put this in to mention that the relationship that people have with their natural features is part of their spiritual area. So this is a spring, and every spring in these mountains is considered a sacred spot. And in areas where there are Tibetan Buddhists, you find that they put prayer flags up, because places that are sacred are places where the promulgation of prayers by the prayer flags is enhanced. And this is Lake Keopechre. This is a sacred lake, and people have been going there for centuries. These long things here, those are rows of prayer flags, prayer wheels. That's where that butterfly picture. So you walk down this one here, you always walk this side and turn them with your right hand, and you come back up the other way and turn them with your right hand. And then that's how you're saying your prayers when you visit the lake. There were some tourists not very good. I remember a young monk yelling at a guy, "Get your feet out of the lake. Don't you know that's holy?" It's the whole lake is considered in. So what you find there is this. And this is a sign as you approach the lake. And it moves me. Kind of said, don't cry when you read it. Heartiest request. May it be by the grace of Almighty God or by natural creation, this Keopechre Lake is as much holy and beautiful as it is famous and graceful from times immemorial. Hence, fasting pilgrims come here to acquire blessing of God, and tourists to enjoy the natural beauties of here. Therefore, to protect the religious purity and natural beauty forever, keeping pure mind and deep thinking, don't throw eating and drinking materials, pieces of paper, and cover of scented agarbatti, incense, etc. in the surroundings of this lake, keeping this lake pure and clean, like your body and mind. Please get faith and satisfaction, inner depth of your heart. Now, how's that a way to say take care of your beautiful spots? And so there are things like this, which are places of beauty built by people who live in these mountains. And this is a place of worship. This is the Rumtek Monastery. And I could easily show lots and lots of pictures if you just like art beauty. And so when from our front porch in Pelling, here's what we saw. I managed to identify them all: Kang, Koptang, Bray Peak, Ratang, and the important one is right there, number 9. That's Kitchenjunga. It's 27,000 something feet tall. And interestingly enough, from where we are here at the Pelling Resort, it's exactly 40 miles away. That's the same distance as Mount Rainier from Seattle. And so that's Kitchenjunga at sunrise. Has been climbed, but not very often. Just getting there, it was one of the toughest of the big ones to be climbed. And then these are the peaks at sunrise. And so this is sunrise, and that's sunset on Jonupu. And we're going to come home.